So what about the origin of life? Nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organized themselves into the first living cell. How do you get life started from non-living material? The Bible says God created every living creature. Why doesn't God get the glory for what he did? This is in like the first chapter of the book, okay? God is claiming he did it. God created every living creature. God claims he created it. Okay, well, I can't think of a better explanation. This textbook says the history of life on Earth began approximately 3.5 billion years ago. How this occurred has been and will be, and will continue to be, a topic for inquiry. Think about what they just told their students. Life began 3.5 billion years ago. How it happened is going to continue to be a topic for inquiries. Go ahead and do a research paper on this. Hovind translation. It's okay to inquire how life evolved. It is not okay to inquire whether it evolved. You see how they're tricking the kids there? Kids, we know life evolved. Please explain to us how. No, let's back up a notch, teacher. You don't know it evolved. You don't know that part either. In the 1950s, Miller and Urey, the famous Miller-Urey experiment, he wanted to know how the Earth and solar system had come to be. I could have told you, Stanley, God made it. Okay. They use Earth's primitive atmosphere. Although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself. No, he did not. He made it much more complicated and said, you know, it could not have possibly happened by itself. Life could not have started by itself, but the textbooks teach, oh yes, boys and girls, the origin of life. Earth Science book, right over there on the shelf. Swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Some of them, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids, the chemicals of life. However, the progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. I have the atheists get mad at me and say, we do not believe we came from soup. Yes, you do.
Oh, yes, they do.
You do.
I saw a movie where they were joking, eat your primordial soup from a caveman.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We got to sell primordial soup here in the bookstore.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Eat your grandpa.
Okay. Now,
they're selling it.
they're selling it, yeah. And no, we're paying for it. They're giving it away. This is a lie. Life did not evolve in the soup or anywhere else, okay? A new theory that explains why the language of our genes is more complex than it needs to be also suggests that primordial soup where life began on Earth was hot and not cold. Oh, so it was hot soup, not cold soup. Both theories are dumb, guys, dumb. Okay, it wasn't hot soup, it wasn't cold soup, it wasn't any soup. Okay, it didn't happen. Okay, give it up. It didn't happen. Where there's soup, there's life. ScienceDaily.com. But we're talking gourmet soup. Oh, now it's gourmet. Gourmet geochemical primordial soup. Whoa, have to get a bigger label on the can. It's just to put the name. Okay, in hot springs and hydrothermal springs in the sea. Okay. The Origin of Species was not addressed in Charlie's book in 1859, even though that was the title of the book, Origin of Species. He never talked about the origin of species. Never did. It's still a mystery in 1998. Both the origin of life and the origin of major groups of animals remains unknown. They still don't know. Students are taught that life evolved from non-living materials. This is right. Most important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was, according to scientists, was the evolution of life. It just happened. Now let's move on, kids. Believe that, and let's move on to step 2, okay? Many important events, this is what it says here, occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life. Progress from complex molecules to even the simplest living organism was a very long process.
They're talking in a circle.
They're hiding the impossible by giving it more time. This is long ago and far away. If I told you Superman could fly through the air, you'd say, oh, that's a fairy tale. And it is, okay? Well, what if he went slowly through the air? What if he walked through the air? Would that become science if it took longer time? Huh? Think. Okay, gee. The first living cells emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. There is no record of the event. Well, then why do you have it in a science book? That's not science. This is fairy tale book stuff, right? This shouldn't be in a science book. The first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. It had to. Had to come from the soup. There's no other choice. Yeah, there is another choice. God made it. This is lie number 37. There is another choice. God did it. They refuse to admit God might have done it. Haeckel claimed that spontaneous generation must be true, not because it had been proven in the laboratory, but because otherwise it would be necessary to believe in a creator. It had to happen by chance. Why? Otherwise there had to be a God. We don't want a God. This is it. This is the battleground right here. They don't want there to be a God telling them what to do. That's it. This is as plain and simple. Have scientists produced life in the laboratory? Miller and Urey did this experiment in the early 50s. They circulated stuff through this with a spark chamber, and they used his experiment produced the chemicals of life. This is what the kids are taught in that biology book over there. At about the same time, Miller discovered the red goo at the bottom of the flask was rich in amino acids. Oh, it was, hold it, rich in amino acids. Now, an amino acid compared to life might be compared to like letters of the alphabet compared to a sentence. A sentence is made up of a whole bunch of letters, right? The amino acids are the little building blocks. You put a bunch of them together in a certain order to make a protein. So the amino acids are like the letters, and the sentence is like the protein chain. Is it possible to arrange letters in a certain way and not spell anything that makes any sense? Is it possible to have a nonsense sequence of letters? If you just randomly drop letters into a line, what is the possibility of you forming a sentence?
What language?
Have scientists produced life in the laboratory? They used methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen. They didn't come close to producing life in the laboratory. Miller excluded oxygen. He knew oxygen would cause a problem because life cannot evolve if oxygen is present. It will oxidize. No oxygen. Methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen. Can't have oxygen. Problem is, amino acids that try to combine would be oxidized. If you try to get the letters to line up, they break apart because they oxidize. Okay? No, they've never produced life in the laboratory or anywhere else. That's why they're going to tell you there was no oxygen on the Earth. Early Earth had 0% oxygen. This is a college textbook. 0% oxygen on Earth. Why would they say that? Today, the atmosphere is 80% nitrogen and 20% oxygen. I would agree, more like 21% oxygen and more like 78% nitrogen. It's got a few other gases in there, but we're not going to argue about that now. This is close enough, okay? In the early Earth, there was very little oxygen. 3.5 billion years ago, there was only 0.01% oxygen in the atmosphere. This was accessed today from the internet, windows-to-universe.org. They're still teaching people the early Earth had almost no oxygen, 0.01%. That's close to nothing. 2.5 billion years ago, there was only 0.1% oxygen. Oh, really? Why do they say that? Well, they know they can't have oxygen because it's going to destroy the life that's trying to form. Yeah, got to get rid of the oxygen. Here's the problem. Ozone is made from oxygen, and oxygen blocks UV light, and ammonia is destroyed by UV light. So life cannot evolve without oxygen. The problem is very simple. Life cannot evolve with oxygen, and life cannot evolve without oxygen. So I think that would mean life cannot evolve. Am I missing something here? Gets worse. Earth has always had oxygen, even more than today. Oxygen is found in the lowest rocks, from Michael Denton's book, his fabulous book. What is the evidence for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere on Earth? The answer is there is no evidence for it and much against it. And the emphasis was in the original. This is National Academy of Sciences back in 1966. Why would a website access today, what is that, 50 years later, still be teaching that there was no oxygen? Methane ammonia atmosphere, that's crazy. This is 1976. In general, we find no evidence in the sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, uranium, and iron that an oxygen-free atmosphere has existed at any time. There's always been oxygen. Oh, how about 1982? It is suggested that from the time of the earliest dated rocks, 3.7 billion years, which I think is pure baloney, but we'll accept that for a minute, Earth had an oxygenic atmosphere. So the oldest rocks do have oxygen. 1992, The only trend in the recent literature is the suggestion of far more oxygen in the early atmosphere than anyone imagined. Maybe up to 35% instead of 21%. You know, if you had richer oxygen, you could run lots further and not get tired. Things would heal up much faster. Yeah, okay. Primordial air may have been breathable. 2002, they knew this. The Earth may have had an oxygen-rich atmosphere as long ago as 3 billion years and possibly even earlier, leading geologists claimed. Well, then why did you today have your website say there was no oxygen on the Earth? Today, the atmosphere is 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. In the early Earth, there was 0.01% access today. You're lying, guys. The evidence is overwhelming. Even if you go by your stupid geologic column and say these rocks are billions of years old, there was always oxygen present. Now, the fact is, there is no geologic column, and all that rock, all the mud layers, sedimentary rock, probably formed in Noah's flood. This is simply a lie. Here's the problem. With Miller and Urey's experiment to try to create life, they filtered out the product. It would circulate through the tube, and they could draw off things that might be helpful to their experiment. That's not realistic for nature. What they actually made in their experiment in the laboratory was 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid, both of which are toxic to life. They made 2% amino acids, which are the letters of the alphabet. 2% of the goo in the bottom of their flask was amino acids. The problems. Mostly only 2 of the amino acids were formed. 20 different ones are needed for life. Just like there's 26 letters in the alphabet, there are 20 different amino acids. They only made 2. So if I drop toothpicks and I'm able to make an N, I can make a whole bunch of N's. And I can make a whole bunch of X's just by dropping toothpicks, couldn't I? How many words can I spell now if I got thousands of N's and thousands of X's? Nix. N-I-X. One word, nix. So they made mostly just 2% amino acids, and the 98% it was mixed in with is going to kill it. And the students are still taught today that Miller and Urey's experiment from the 50s helped advance the idea that life came from non-life. They're lying to you. And they bond with the tar and the acid much more quickly than they bond with each other. So you got to get these amino acids to stick to each other to make a protein chain. They'd much rather stick to the tar. You're not going to get them to stick together. Amino acids are like letters, which are building blocks to make words, to make paragraphs, to make books. He made the equivalent of a few letters when he needed to make a huge book. Half the amino acids he produced were left-handed and half right-handed. Is it true that some letters backwards don't exist in our language? There's no backwards K in the English language. If half of his were left-handed, half were right-handed, now you got a more serious problem, because they've got to all be the same way. The smallest proteins have 70 to 100 amino acids in precise order, all of them left-handed. So what's the chances of dropping toothpicks and I'll give you Scrabble letters. Already got the letter, not even toothpicks. I'll give you the letter on a piece of wood, Scrabble. Get a Scrabble game. Drop the Scrabble letters. What's the possibility of getting 70 to 100 of them to make one sentence that has 100 letters in it? Is there any chance that would happen in a trillion years? Some atheist is going to say, Hovind doesn't even know his numbers. Okay, million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, sextillion, septillion, octillion, novillion, decillion. How high you want to count? I taught math 15 years, whether you believe it or not. I think I can count higher than you. Okay. DNA and RNA nucleotides are all right-handed. Interesting. The proteins are all, amino acids are all left-handed in proteins, but the RNA and DNA are all right-handed. This is a real serious problem for those who want to get life to evolve by chance. You get into that much when you debate them, brother? I think it's an impossible one for them to fix.
Yeah, it is.
It's impossible. Because if you drop your Scrabble letters and if just one of them is backwards, the whole sentence is scrapped. Has to be spelled right. Because if the proteins are not exactly right, the body rejects them. Got a self-spell checking mechanism. Yeah. This very puzzling fact, all the proteins that have been investigated obtained from animals and from plants and higher organisms and simple organisms, bacteria, molds, even viruses, are found to have been made of left-handed amino acids. Linus Pauling said that. Hundreds of amino acids must combine to make proteins, yet they unbond in water faster than they bond. The oceans are full of water. And they told me this happened in the oceans. Well, now you got a problem. You got to get at least 20 together to make the simplest proteins. 20 of them in the right order, all right-handed, and spelled right. And they're in water. It's not going to happen in water. That's why they say it's a warm little pond someplace where it could be concentrated. Brownian motion is going to drive them away from each other to equilibrium, and it's not going to drive them together. This is insanity. This is one of the lies in the textbooks. That's long enough. We've been gone a long time.
Yeah.
I've got 20 more ready. Tomorrow we'll do a few more.